Hey, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon if you're on the East Coast. Thanks, John and Sergio, for that nice introduction. Sounded pretty impressive. I didn't realize you were talking about me there for a minute. Here are the things we're going to go over today. We're going to talk a little bit about Caltech. Most everybody's heard of Caltech, but I'll talk a little bit about the details, really not related to the construction program, but just how, some of the background stuff at Caltech. You can find that online as well if you so desire. Talk a little bit about the mission at Caltech and how that intersects with these laboratory projects, pretty salient point. Talk about how things were in 2008, and 2008 is when I got here, so I kind of inherited this situation, and talk a little bit about process improvement, and I call it Project Management 101, not to be disrespectful, but a lot of this stuff isn't rocket science, but what's interesting about it for me is how it dovetails between the higher ed situation where you have a joint governance perspective, and then you also have to get these projects done on time and on budget, and those things don't always really line up. And so, like I say, it's in the details. Then we'll talk about results, and then we'll talk about what we're doing going forward. So the mission of Caltech. It's like most places, it's a pretty interesting mission, and I'm just going to go ahead and read it to you because I don't memorize, but it says the mission of Caltech is to expand human knowledge and benefit society through research integrated with education. We investigate the most challenging and fundamental problems in science and technology in a singularly collegial, interdisciplinary atmosphere while educating outstanding students to become creative members of society. So that's a pretty robust mission, and one of the things that I had to think about when I got here was how does facilities actually fit into that mission? And those of you who are in higher ed, we're behind the scenes. We make all the stuff happen. We provide the utilities, we provide the laboratory facilities, that kind of stuff. But sometimes finding that actual connection is challenging. Caltech is located in Pasadena, California. Most people, not everybody's been to Pasadena, but anybody who's ever watched the Rose Bowl or the Rose Parade on New Year's, that's Pasadena. That's kind of like that's the advertisement for California in the winter for all the people who live in the Midwest and New England and those places. Our campus population, another thing people don't know a whole lot about, we have 978 undergraduates total. So that's the whole population for this upcoming year. Along with those undergraduates, we have 1,253 graduate students. So total campus population students is only 2,200 and some change. So not a very big campus. But for those 2,230 or so students, we have almost 300 professorial faculty. So it's a lot of faculty related to the number of students. And what's key about that is, and it goes back to our mission, we are a research institute that educates, and so there's an awful lot of square footage of laboratory that we have in our square footage. And located in the middle of Pasadena, we're 125 acres, and we have about 70 major academic buildings. The one in front of you there on the screen is one that we just recently renovated. It houses the Joint Center for Artificial Photosynthesis and the Resnick Sustainability Institute. But that's just one of about 70 that we have. The building stock is, between 0 and 90 years old, has, for all laboratories and all other functions for education, the average age of the building is about 50 years. Something about our science awards, and of course this has very little to do with facilities and a lot to do with the scientists, but I think it's noteworthy. Caltech has had 31 recipients of the Nobel Prize, 32 prizes. One person actually received it 2 times. 7 recipients of the Crawford Prize, and 4 recipients of the Kavli Prize. So pretty well-respected faculty here. Capital program. Well, so my job as a Senior Director of Design and Construction is to do all the projects, from the bathroom and office renovation projects to building the new buildings. The building you see in front of you is it's the Cahill Center for Astronomy and Astrophysics. We just did that. We finished that in 2009. We do about $50 million a year, and that's renovation and new construction. In the last 5 years, we've completed 3 new buildings, one of which is the Cahill Center you see, and we've done 2 whole building renovations. Those 5 projects are about $195 million and 265,000 gross square feet. But the projects we're to talk about today are the other projects. And in that 5 years, we've done about 100,000 square feet of new laboratory space in existing buildings. And that's about $650 a square foot, if you can imagine. And we'll talk about those costs a little bit as we go forward. But it's been about $65 million over the 5 years spent on those renovation projects. We have roughly 40 projects going on at one time. You know, that whole spectrum from whole buildings to smaller projects. Although that doesn't include infrastructure projects, just so you know. We have probably another 40 going on of infrastructure projects, whether they're piping or electrical and those type of things. And the staff that we do this with, I have 13 what I call project management related staff. There's a project coordinator, there's a couple assistant project managers, about 10 project managers, and myself. I have an on-staff architect, and I have mechanical, electrical, and structural engineers. So that makes up our internal design team.
Ken, if I could make a comment here. We, in our business, hear a lot when people hear these collaborative online project or program management systems, they always think of them being used on $100 million projects, these big 2-, 3-, 4-year-long projects. Did you have the thought going into this that it was going to be used for effectively the complete opposite of 40 or 50 of these projects going on, smaller projects that they're shorter scheduled? Was that your plan all along?
That was. So that's a really good point. And it's funny, there's a lot of things like that in project management where people think that only applies to certain size projects and that type of thing. But no, for us with eBuilder, we have definitely, every project that is funded with either our capital pot or what we call our renewal pot, our renovation pot, every project, even if it's 10 grand, frankly, goes into eBuilder. Now, we don't use all of the modules in eBuilder for all those projects, but they all go in there and they're all tracked, and that way we can actually look at it from a program perspective. The reporting capability of eBuilder is excellent along those lines, and so we can roll up the whole program year and take a look at it as far as budget performance and schedule performance. So that's a good point.
And Ken, just to follow up, we have a K-12 owner that wrote me, said, did I just hear the engineering, MEP, and architectural services are all internal? Is there no contracting for outside design services, he asked?
Oh, that's a really good question. No, and that's, I misled you. I have one mechanical engineer, one electrical engineer, and one part-time structural engineer. And those gentlemen, because they are men at this point, they do all of our submittal reviews and our design reviews. So when we hire a design team, they review those things. They also do, related to these projects we're talking about today, they also do what I call concept level design, where we'll do, basically concept design that we turn over to a design build team. So those guys are very busy, as you might imagine. But so we definitely hire outside consultants to do design for us. Those 3 people just, along with our campus inspector, we do a lot of the type of in-house plan check stuff, make sure we're meeting our standards. So the problem statement, and you can see it right there, it was so bad that we were not even believed when we gave timelines. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but people would actually add months to we would say, okay, we'll be done in January, and then the next thing I know, somebody would come back and say, oh, no, facility said it'd be done in March. And I'd say, no, we said we'd be done in January, and, well, we heard March. So, that's pretty bad when they don't even believe the schedule you put out. So that's where we were. We were not in the communication loop. The academic side of the house and the provost's office, they didn't even think about including us in the loop when we were going to hire new faculty or when a new faculty had accepted that was going to need a lab. I think they just didn't think it made any difference. We were procuring things in Caltech is a 501c3 nonprofit, and being such, we're not subject to the public contract code here in California or the federal acquisition regulation or anything like that. So we can procure in different ways. We don't have any of those state law issues. We still have to meet the requirements of a 501c3, which are relatively stringent, but we were procuring all over the map. And a lot of times my project managers would end up being basically the general contractor, subbing the things out to a mechanical company or electrical company or finishes company to do the work, and it was very time-consuming. And so the overall process was not well-defined, and frankly, everybody had a different spreadsheet to do everything. And that was pre-eBuilder, obviously. But even before eBuilder, we had to get some consistency in how we portrayed things and how we planned things, and that just wasn't happening. So I'm going to jump to a little bit about what we did and what we ended up with, and then I'll talk more about the details here in a second. The first thing we had to do is we had to increase credibility. In order to be in the communication loop at a place like Caltech, and probably most higher ed institutes or universities, you have to be credible, and we weren't. So we had to get some quick wins in order to show some success so that people actually thought, oh, okay, these guys, they might actually be able to do what they say they're going to do. We immediately delved into the project life cycle and looked at soup to nuts, how we were planning, how we were procuring, what the options were, where we could tweak things, and what our blind spots were. Along the lines of the first thing that we did, and it sounds so crazy, that's why I say it's PM 101, but we instituted schedules. When I got here in 2008, I said, hey, everybody give me your project schedules, and we didn't have any. We didn't even have a Microsoft project schedule. So obviously that capability is an e-builder, which is great because I don't have to ask everybody for their schedules anymore, but we immediately started creating schedules so we could communicate those schedules to the academic side of the house, the new faculty, and the administrators. It was a big change, believe it or not, and it was something that was really needed. And then we made a little incremental progress. Almost immediately in 2009, we had a couple of projects that worked really well, where we collaborated well with the academic side, and it showed that it worked. And once that happened, then it kind of started to snowball. And everybody was wanting to talk to us and wanting to engage us as early as possible in the process. So back to the initial situation. We had zero view into what was going on in the academic divisions. And by the way, I keep saying division, and for those of you who aren't familiar with that, it's like a college at most universities. Caltech is broke up into 6 academic divisions. For instance, geology and planetary sciences is one, biology is another one. So we have 6 of those, and they are led by what's called a chairman, the chair of biology, that type of thing. So I'll keep referring to that. But the divisions of the provost office, they didn't inform us when offers went out, when offers were accepted. They didn't consult us on what building the faculty should go into. They wouldn't even consult us on what space they should use. And if you think about that from a business perspective and how to get these things done, it was impossible. And I've got an example. We have a scientist who got here in 2008. I'm going to read a little bit of what it says on the website about him, but he does quantum limited measurements, ultra-low temperature physics, nanotechnology, and ultra-sensitive microwave measurement. So he's trying to measure things smaller than anybody ever has, basically. And he needed double height space, 2-floor space. Well, there's not just 2-floor space hanging around in the buildings. So without consulting me or anybody in facilities, they decided to put this gentleman in the sub-basement. And the sub-basement at Caltech is the second basement. There's a first basement, and there's a basement below that, second basement. They decided to put him in the sub-basement of a 1922 building and dig out the floor so that we could have a double-height space. Now, that sounds like it's a plausible idea, but I'm here to tell you it wasn't the best idea. And that project was sunk before it even began. So that communication was terrible. Again, lack of consistency. We were doing things in a bunch of different ways. And then, honestly, my group had a lack of emphasis on these projects. I figured out immediately that these new faculty laboratory processes, and actually I kind of missed to talk about that earlier. The reason these projects are so important, when we talk about doing fundamental science and all these science-related fields, part of Caltech's core mission is to attract and retain the best scientists in every discipline. And I read that list of science awards. That's not by coincidence. That didn't just happen. Caltech wants to have. If you're a top scientist in the world, then we're probably looking to have you come and be a part of Caltech. And part of attracting those faculty is the need to build their lab on time. There's nobody more unhappy, other than maybe me, but the most unhappy person on the planet is the new faculty that arrives here and their lab isn't ready to go. They're sitting around waiting for the lab to be done. They're in some temporary space. That is a recipe for disaster, because not only are they unhappy, but they talk about that unhappiness with their colleagues around the world. And so that was something that the administration here at Caltech realized was not going well back in 2008, and then they had to make a change. And so that's when I got to come in here and start working on these things. So I immediately figured out these were the most important projects that we're doing, even though they're only 500, 1,000, maybe up to 5,000 square feet. And if it's 5,000 square feet, it's probably $4 million. So it's not a huge project, and that's kind of a project budget, but very important. So I've talked about this a little bit, but basically, as of 2008, I don't think nobody would admit that we've gotten one of these projects done on time in the last 4 years at that point. I mean, that's pathetic, and that's probably not necessarily true, but it was definitely the perception. Very low confidence, and it was hurting our ability to attract new faculty.
Ken, there's a question someone's asking. They're curious about your general impressions or challenges on working with these Nobel laureates versus past working relationships with non-laureates. I mean, is it a different interaction with them?
That's an interesting question. And I hope some of them are online right now, because a number of the Nobel laureates are still here at Caltech, and I'm joking. I'm sure they're not online. They're doing stuff more important than listening to me. But it's an individual personality thing, and I say that with no judgment or prejudice. The truth is, some of the Nobel laureates on campus are the most congenial, easy to work with, practical people you would ever meet, and that you would just love doing a project for. And then others are, they're just more challenging. They're more precise about things. They might have an eccentric taste in finishes, so it's just like any walk of life. I mean, if you were doing residential houses, some people would be really easy to work for, and then some people would be not as easy. And I would say that the what I call the client here at Caltech, the faculty and academic side, is just like that. Some of them are the most reasonable and practical people in the world, and some of the other ones are a little bit more challenging. So no real dirt to sling there, I have to say. So a big part of my job is to work directly with the provost. And in essence, there is a associate vice president, Jim Cowell, who is my boss, and he and I work together to work with the provost. But I'm on the provost speed dial related to these projects, because these are near and dear to his life, in that he's trying to attract these new faculty in here. So immediately, within a couple of months of me being here at Caltech, he and I developed a real partnership and relationship to work together on these things. And it has been, and he's still the provost. It's been 5 years. It's just been fantastic. And honestly, the success that we've had would not have occurred had the provost not been open to some of my changes and some of the ideas that I had. It sounds crazy when you start talking about projects, but we just didn't have any time management. We didn't have any time management tools. We weren't sending out projects. First thing we did was we created Microsoft project templates. I'm embarrassed to talk about it because it sounds so crazy, but we would have a schedule, and we'd say, okay, we're going to be done in July. and then the new faculty or the academic division wouldn't make decisions on time to what fume hood we were going to buy, what was the casework going to be like, where the glove boxes were going to go. And, you know, you can just list out as many as you want, crazy number of things that weren't getting decided, and somehow they would still think that, wow, we're going to be done in July. And March would come along, and we'd say, well, no, we're not going to be done in July because the fume hood's not going to be here until September. Well, what do you mean? So the simple use of a schedule to communicate where those decision points are and the other things that are at risk in the management of the time was very important. And the visibility of that had, you know, basically since we started doing that, nothing's ever been late. Things have gotten pushed back, but they've always gotten pushed back for reasons that were, you know, that understandable and something you could communicate. And then we started, at the same time, we were experimenting with how we were going to procure. As I said, the project managers that were here at the time were really doing a lot of being the general contractor and subbing things out. I immediately looked at a design-build model only because I'm not, you know, people always accuse me of being being in love with design-build, but the truth is, for these new laboratories in these old buildings, there is an advantage to having a general contractor on board to do the demolition while the design is going on, so you don't really have all those unforeseen conditions in the walls. If you can imagine buildings built back in the 20s and 30s and 40s, maybe they haven't been renovated for 50 years, maybe our as-builts, which are probably just about as good as everybody else's, aren't that good, and we have no idea what's going to be in the walls, you know, or whether the air handler is going to be able to support it, or whether the electrical service can be able to support it. So going to design build, getting the general contractor to do the demolition, having their architect and design team right there with them, that's been a real plus for us. But we experimented around with a lot of different procurement methods. So here's a typical project. This is actually an easy project. It wasn't really easy on the timeline, but this building was built in 1974, which is relatively new for our buildings. It hadn't been renovated since then, but it wasn't miserable. Now, everybody knows that 74 was before ADA, and certainly fire life safety issues have changed a lot, so we had to do a lot of handrail changing and that type of thing in this building. It was 4,500 square foot laboratory space for a biologist coming in here, and we had 8 months to get it done. And so I don't know if that seems like that's quick to anybody, but I'm here to tell you that's pretty quick. That's from the day we find out the new faculty is coming to the day we cut the ribbon. And this faculty was at MIT, you know, some small school in the Northeast, obscure. Probably nobody's heard about that. So, but you know, it's one of those schools. We hired the design build team immediately, based on a concept design, and then we engaged that faculty via not a webinar, but a WebEx and conference calls. And the other thing that we do now is when a faculty is going to come here to Caltech, they usually accept about a year out. So right now, faculty are accepting for the next academic year coming next September. But in the meantime, they come visit every once in a while. And initially, they would never include us in that schedule, which sounds crazy, but that's the way that it was. Now, they always include us. And so I say the academic division says, okay, you're going to be here in September for this visit. We got to get you half a day with the facilities guys so you can actually walk through your plans, you know, face to face. So we do that. Again, we got the space as soon as possible. As you can see, this floor right here, the upper right photo, obviously that's pretty well gutted. And then the photo on the bottom left that's his machine shop that's in that space as well. So we do the design from afar. We do collaboration. You know, we don't call it integrated project delivery, but we take a lot of the things out of integrated project delivery, and we do those here on these projects.
Ken, there's a question here from the group. It's actually one of your peers in a college in Chicago. And he said, wow, this sounds very familiar. How does your department interface with legal do you have standard contract forms, or do the lawyers have to review everything?
Oh, I'm going to talk about that coming up. But actually, it's on this slide. The bullet that says creation of standards. One of the first things we did was we created standard contract templates, and it's tough, if you think about it, because it's not one size fits all, and we're procuring under different methods. Sometimes we're doing firm fixed price contracting. Sometimes we're doing design build contracting, and sometimes that design build is firm fixed price, and sometimes it's guaranteed maximum price. We also use a modified AIA template for a guaranteed maximum price contract. So I haven't mentioned that. I'm glad they asked that question, because that was a key part of moving this forward with some consistency, was getting the lawyers out of the business. And the lawyers that support us here at Caltech are fantastic, but we only get them involved at this point if there's a problem. And in general, and they still they still have a cursory review, but we have templates that we've worked on with them and other construction industry professionals. And so if we don't modify things, the lawyer or the Office of General Counsel review is very quick.
Great, thank you.
Sure. So as we move forward, with transparency and accountability, there was trust, and there was inclusion. And I kind of joke about it, and I probably shouldn't, but I'm not the first person the new faculty meet, obviously, because they meet who they're going to be, their colleagues are in their academic division and that type of thing, and the provost and the president. But I'm probably in the top 10 if they're going to have a laboratory built, only because the timing of the laboratory is so key, and it basically has to be done. If it's not done, people are really unhappy. The new faculty feel like they didn't get what they were promised. The academic divisions and the chairman in the divisions are put in the spot where they're explaining things they don't want to be explaining. So being in the loop and being included is very important. I mean, at this point, most of the chairmen, the 6 academic divisions, actually consult me before they commit to a date when the laboratory is going to be done, which is kind of unheard of. And I don't say that flippantly at all. I say it humbly that I feel great that they are willing to consult me on those things so that we can make sure that we put our best foot forward for the new faculty when they come in. The process improvement has been great. Process improvement is really interesting thing. If you're not having many successes, if all the projects are late or over budget, then you're doing a lot of work on lessons learned. And guess what? If you're doing a lot of work on lessons learned, then you got less time to do the new work. So process improvement is challenging when things aren't going very well. But at this point, when things are more or less going well, it's easy to go and dissect through the issues that you have and the results that you have to figure out why things didn't work out so well. And then the last bullet on there about creation of standards, it really is across the board. The schedule templates. It was the use of eBuilder. eBuilder was a huge impetus for us to map our processes, and I mean all processes, but, applications for payment, invoicing, bidding, submittals, reviews of those, all that stuff. We were beginning to do that, and eBuilder was a great platform to do that. Anybody who's familiar with eBuilder knows you can go in and you can look right at the process that you're in. You can see what step it's on and who's got the ball in court. So that was really instrumental for us. Again, the contract templates I talked about. We created a design guide. I imagine most of the higher ed and other big campus owners online have a design guide. We didn't have one. It was debilitating, not only from a architect and engineer perspective to design stuff for us, but also from an operations and maintenance perspective. We've got a design guide now that we've got input from all our operations and maintenance staff, and so we can actually build and provide things that they're able to maintain and operate.
Kevin, we have 2 questions that have built up here. One is, do you work with outside financing, such as federal, NIH, or DOD grants? And if so, what challenges are brought with that project aspect?
Sure, absolutely. Occasionally, we will have a project that actually has some project construction funding by NIH or DOE. Anybody that's done that knows there are always some wickets that need to be, that you need to get through in order to get those projects done. Right now, we've got a project funded by, partially funded by NIH, the National Institute of Health, and before they give you the money, they've got to approve the design. So, you got to work that in. You definitely got to work that into your schedule and make sure everybody knows up front that, first off, that's not a slam dunk, that you're going to get the design approved in a timely fashion. I mean, I suppose it's pretty much a slam dunk that you'll ultimately get it approved. That is, if you want the money, of course. But so, I mean, most of the time, those projects have had more of the schedule impact in that way. There's always reporting requirements for those as well, and you have to dig into the grant application to figure out what those reporting requirements are and whether you have to use data space and wages or whether you have to do Buy American, and those things always come into play. Not unlike when I was in the Navy operating under the Federal Acquisition Regulation, most of the projects we do don't have specific construction project or renovation project dollars in them. Now, some of them are funded in some sense by indirect cost recovery off of research grants. There's no doubt about that, because indirect cost recovery off of research grants is a big part of our budget at Caltech. So some of that money is used as part of the general budget, which funds some of these renovation projects. But in that case, there isn't a direct link to requirements on those grants. Let me know.
So can we have? It does. We have another very interesting question here. They're saying, since you have a background from one of the largest school districts in the country, LA Unified, and then you jump to the other side on the higher ed, can you compare and contrast the differences between those programs as it relates to eBuilder? Specifically, could a system like that work in the way that you set it up here for a school district?
That's a really good question. When I was at LAUSD, we had just about every software purveyor in the world trying to come and be the software on that program. And prior to my getting there, the program was operating since about 1999, I think. I didn't get there until 2004. So it was already established. But what we did, and I would not do it again, frankly, but what LAUSD did was they created a homegrown system for controls and program management. And so we had to have, the guys with kind of like with the green eye shades back in the back room writing the code for the software systems to make it work right and to dovetail into all of the LAUSD software. I think that a tool like eBuilder and the way we've set it up here at Caltech would work for a large program like that. You certainly would have more people making it work. My entire staff here is 20 people. So I've got one person who's a project manager who wishes he was an IT guy, and so he spends half of his time working on all of our software systems and trying to make them integrate and work better together. At LAUSD, when I was in charge of program controls for that $12 billion program, I probably had 35 people that were doing that type of work, between the controls guys and the schedule guys and then the people writing the code. So I definitely think eBuilder is a great step in the right direction. I think, like any software, though, there's two key things. One is that you got to make sure you know your requirements up front so that you figure out the software works. And two, you got to have people working on it that can actually take your processes and stick them into the software so that it works for you. So but eBuilder has, and from my perspective, a very good flexibility for that.
Great, thank you.
So I've talked about these things a little bit. We got great this is the current state. We got great communication going on now, but communication is key. And when 9 times out of 10 when we have a problem, it's a communication problem. It might be we're disrupting a neighboring faculty because we didn't tell them we were going to be saw cutting the concrete or whatever. But that's all comes down to communication. So we're still working on that, but it's certainly a lot better. The planning is the other key, and the ability to engage the faculty right off the bat is instrumental. The ability to have some standards for casework and fume hoods and mechanical and electrical systems is key as well, because it takes a lot of the noodling out of the process, and so it streamlines it. And then, like I already said, project execution. Our mode right now, in general, is we do design build with a concept design done by in-house. And when I say concept, it's concept. It's not schematic. It's concept. So it's a floor plan that shows what the types of functions are going to be and where the casework is going to be. The casework isn't designed, though. It isn't. We don't know what the shelves are going to look like or what the cabinet's going to look like. We show where the fume hoods are, and we have a couple of fume hoods that we spec regularly. Gone through a pretty laborious process to get to that point. But we provide that concept design to design build teams, and then they propose. And we do it on a best value procurement, where they propose a team to do it, and we specify what the team needs to include. It needs to include a project manager, a superintendent, project engineer. Most time, not project engineer on these size jobs, but definitely at least a half-time project manager and a full-time superintendent. Otherwise, they don't get done and they're not coordinated well enough. But that's our mode right now for doing project execution.
And a couple of questions building up here. One is, do you have anyone that works for any of your outside consultants using eBuilder, or is eBuilder just limited to your internal set of project managers and users?
Oh, well, that's the best thing about being the owner, because we specify in our contracts that the contractors and architects and engineers will use eBuilder. And the way we do that, and John knows this, but we have, and I don't know the terminology, but we basically have a site license for eBuilder that allows us to flex with the size of our program, and so flex the number of licenses we have. So we require their use of eBuilder. When I say they, architects, engineers, contractors, and then we provide them the license to do it. So we're getting submittals through eBuilder. We're getting pay apps through eBuilder. We're getting RFIs through eBuilder, and it's working out well.
Great. And then there was another one here. What other programs besides eBuilder? Well, actually, there's a question about which other systems did you review before purchasing, but I'll actually cover that with this person offline, because I don't want to make it into a sales pitch. But maybe spin off of that question. I know that you've integrated with FAMIS, F-A-M-I-S. Can you just talk about what that system is and what was the impetus or the value for you to even consider doing that integration?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I'll talk about it very generally, and that is we looked at, I think the final number was 7 different systems before we picked eBuilder. And one of those was FAMIS. FAMIS is F-A-M-I-S. It's a Facility Asset Management Information System. And FAMIS has a capital projects module, for those of you that have it. And we looked at its ability to provide information that we wanted to be able to have at our fingertips, and how robust it was as far as being able to map processes and that type of thing. And it just didn't meet our needs for capital projects. So we still use FAMIS, which is why I'm talking about it, as our preventive maintenance tool here on campus. And we've integrated with that with eBuilder to pump into it work orders. Work orders? Yeah. So when we create a work order in in eBuilder, it goes automatically into Famous on some period, maybe a 4-hour period, a couple times a day. So then the shops, so we get all of our shops work through Famous. So it still manages the shops work for carpenter shop, electric shop, paint shop, if we're doing some of the work in-house. So that's how we create it. It also tracks the project manager's time in Famous. So we needed a more robust project management tool, but we weren't going to throw out all the other stuff that we were doing with Famous. So we worked through it with eBuilder and figured out how to, and worked through it with people at Accruent, which owns Famous, and figured out how to do a integration. And then we also get, so then Famous goes into our Oracle system, and coming out of Oracle, we get all of the cost data, and that gets, and we've got an integration with eBuilder from that direction to get all the cost data back into eBuilder as well out of Oracle.
Great.
So let's talk a little bit about results. We're getting close to the end here. It's a beautiful thing. We have a reputation for getting stuff done now, and I'm really proud to say that. I think we're counted on as a valued team member when it comes to these new faculty. I think that the assumption is that when we say we're going to get something done on a particular date, that the assumption is that we're going to, and people believe it. They're no longer adding lunch to the schedules. And it's a funny thing. It sounds boastful saying that, and I don't mean it that way, because it actually makes everything better. If people think they can count on you, they're more likely to include you in the conversation, and then communication just goes up exponentially from there. Now I basically have a 9-month turnaround that I am committed to. From the time we know a new faculty is coming, it takes us 9 months to get the project done. And, that's not across the board. If we had to do the guy that's in the sub-basement of the building that was built in 1922 and put his liquid nitrogen freezers down below the bottom deck, that one probably take more than 9 months. But in general, if we got a biologist or a chemist or an engineer coming in that has a pretty standard lab, we do them in 9 months. We figured out the long lead items, the fume hoods and the autoclaves and the cold rooms. We spec those out early. We get a decision from the faculty early, and that really helps that 9 months. And that 9 months also includes commissioning and safety precautions, safety certifications of the fume hoods and those type of things. My organization dovetailed into the overall institute. We're in a situation now where we're all sharing knowledge in order to do these things better. And it's like everybody's pulling on the rope at the same time in the same direction. So it works out really well. We know some of the past challenges. We know what, hey, this building still got knob and tube electrical, or this building, the air handler unit is not going to be adequate. And so we know those things right up front, and it makes a big difference when you start planning these projects. And, the impact on the mission, and I got to be a little careful with this, honestly. I don't want to be too big-headed about it, but the truth is, well, I'll show the next slide. So this is scheduled performance on new faculty laboratories. And the bar to the left is the sum total of the 5 bars to the right. So 74%, which is not good enough, frankly. Not good enough in the overall scheme of things, but that's how many projects have been completed on time since I've been here. The bar to the right, I think, is going to probably be the new norm, and that's for fiscal year 12 that ends here at the end of September. And we had 10 of these projects this year. 10 projects, about $22 million worth of work, and 9 out of 10 of them were done on time. The 10th one, I would like for it to have been done on time as well, but honestly, the 10th one was still done prior to the faculty getting here, but it was done a month after we had committed to having it done. So I'm counting it as being late, and I think we got to say what we're going to do, and then we got to do what we say. So, but 9 out of 10 is an improvement. I put this chart together, and I was I was honestly surprised when I put it together because it looks like it's fake. It's a stair step to the right, but it is in fact the real data. And people pay attention to data at Caltech, as you might imagine.
So Ken, what part of developing of your processes and then codifying those processes into a system, how much of it was just good process, and how much of it was having a system like eBuilder to, put that all together, make that happen?
That's a good question, John. The short of it is that in an organization this size that wants to maintain a very flat organization and hierarchy, you don't have the bandwidth to hire somebody to come in and map out your processes for you. And you probably don't have the resources to hire a temp or a firm to do that for you. We started down the process of mapping our processes internally, and it was really challenging and really time-consuming, not only time-consuming on me, but time-consuming on several of the project managers. And it was not really, shall I say, practical. It just didn't work really well. So there's no doubt in my mind that eBuilder's ability to do that inside the software was certainly part of the reason why we selected eBuilder, but it was also probably that tipping point and impetus for us to really map out our processes. And until you map out your processes, if you haven't done it, you don't know this. If you have done it, it's an obvious thing, but until you map out your processes, you can't really become efficient. And you can't really look at places where, well, why are we doing that? Or why are we going to see that person again with the application for payment? They've already seen it once. Or, just pick a question. Because, so the short of it is that without a tool like eBuilder, and eBuilder specifically for us, we would not have been able to map out our processes in the time that we did it. The other thing that was really good about it was that we did it internally with some help from eBuilder, but we did it so it made everybody more knowledgeable about our processes, which might sound crazy, but like I said at the beginning, people were all doing things their own way. We weren't consistent with how we were getting things done. So by mapping them out and having 6 project managers in a room talking about what the next step in the process ought to be, it made everybody smarter about it. It educated everybody in how we were doing things. So it was a big help.
Ken, I'm going to combine 3 questions here, and I can repeat a few of them if you need. But the first is sort of building on your notion of processes. You develop processes, and then you coded them into eBuilder. So one of the questions that's being asked is, what was your order of priority when you were developing these processes? So you talked earlier about RFI, submittals, change orders. What were maybe the first or second processes that you worked on that were critical? Is the first part of the question, and then I'll follow up with the second part.
I would say that, with a broad brush, I would say that we focused on the financial stuff initially. We focused on applications for payment, schedule of values, applications for payment, invoicing, and those type of things. So in the cost module in eBuilder and getting that stuff worked out, so we focused financially. We immediately implemented, and this is something you got to think about if you're going down this path of implementing a project management software like eBuilder. How much of it do you implement right away? Do you just do a couple of modules on every project, or do you take a couple of projects and do every module? So what we did, and I probably would do it this way again, is that we just drew a line in the sand and we said, this next fiscal year, every project goes into eBuilder. Prior to that, we had moved a few projects over in eBuilder. Some of the projects that were going to have longer durations that were going to be around for a while. That was pretty tough. I don't know that I would do that again. It created a lot of grind, and the value that we gained out of being able to look at those projects in eBuilder was probably not worth the grind as it turned out. But so what we did, we implemented all the processes or all the modules at the same time for all the projects, and that was a little challenging. But relatively small number of projects. I think probably 40 a year or so, and relatively small number of people that we had to get trained. 13 project management staff and a couple of engineers and myself. So that's where we started. Now we've moved out and we've got finance and procurement are actually using eBuilder now to do their approvals inside. Does that answer the question?
It does. Follow-up to that, someone asked if you have finance people. You've answered that. And what about the faculty? You talked about updating the faculty. Are you giving them access to eBuilder, or are you alternatively just producing reports from eBuilder and sending it to them?
We're doing the latter. I don't know that I don't know that it would be worthwhile to train a faculty on use of eBuilder for one project. And that's the one thing you have to remember with these new faculty projects. These laboratories we're building may be the lab that those people are in for 25 years, because a lot of people do that here at Caltech. So that's why they're so important to them, and that's why the results are so important. But for them to get into eBuilder and look at stuff, probably, we'll probably go down that path and make that an option in the future. We haven't gotten there yet. We've been implemented now really 1 year, because we fiscal year 12 was the first year we put in the eBuilder the whole year, but we did a few projects before that. So we're still pushing out the use of eBuilder to some of the other organizations on campus, but we're getting there.
Okay. And we've got 2 more questions if you want to take a minute each, and we'll go right to our 2 o'clock here. Who's the highest person in the organization that's actually accessing eBuilder? You mentioned Jim Coel. Are there people above him that you find are needing to access the system?
That's funny. Caltech's pretty flat. There's only 2 people above Jim Coel in Caltech. There's the president of Caltech, and then there's the vice president for business and finance. Now, as far as our approval levels for projects, the vice president for business and finance, a gentleman named Dean Curry, he probably only has to approve 4 contracts a year. So he's not in eBuilder yet. And again, that's another one of those questions, whether he will be in eBuilder. Jim Colwell's in it, who is the associate vice president for facilities. Sharon Patterson has access to it, associate vice president for finance. They probably only have 20 actions a year that require their approval level, but they are in it. So it's and then Jim's my boss. So I mean, there's only 3 people above me here at Caltech, and there's 2 above Jim. So I hope that answers the question.
It does. And then last but not least, somebody early on had asked a question: what changes did you have to effect in the staff that you inherited to get them on board with eBuilder?
That's not one of my staff, is it?
I don't think so. No.
I'm real happy to say that probably 70% of the people that were here when I got here are still here, and the other 30% have left for a variety of reasons. We are working on professional development right now. Half the project managers are certified as project management professionals. Every project manager at this point is at least a green associate, a lead green associate. By this time next year, everybody will either be a certified construction manager out of CMAA or be a project management professional out of the PMI, Project Management Institute. So we're working on professional development, and we have had a lot of learning curve. Some people were really competent project managers when I got here, some maybe less so, and part of my job has been to raise the bar for everybody as far as their knowledge and their abilities, and so we're getting there. But like I say, a full 70% of the project managers that were here when I got here are still here. I've hired a few, but they probably brought the average up a little bit as far as project management skills. But in general, everybody that's on the team at this point is a good team player.
Great. Well, Ken, on that note, I want to pass along a comment that somebody wrote in, and they said my choice this morning was either watching the iPhone 5 launch today live, or Ken's talk, and then ... Ken's talk was good. So I think you had almost 100 people attend. So maybe you're not Tim Cook from Apple, but you did pretty good. So I want to thank you a lot and thank all the attendees. Sergio, let me turn it over to you for any final comments or housekeeping items, and then have you close out.